Develop your skills. Exercise 4, Development 02. Use Solver. Previously, we had worked with goal seek, and what goal seek is just one cell becomes the goal, and one cell changes to meet that goal. Pretty simple and straightforward. The solver is a souped-up version of that. Instead of just one goal and one change, we can set a goal, and then we can change as many cells as we need to do that, and we can set parameters on those changes to keep certain values within ranges that we desire. This takes a little work to get going, but I believe we've got the tools to really make the solver work. Let's go through a solver problem now. Open up the workbook from the previous exercise, and be sure that these are your default values. 700,000, 600,000, 6%, 60 months. Just be sure that you have these values. Pause and copy those in if you need. Ready? Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to go get the solver. The problem with the solver, and I really wish the book hadn't done this, it says choose data, analysis, solver. Here's data. You see analysis in any of these? I don't. This is not active by default. The solver is a pretty powerful and complicated tool, and chances are if you're using it, you know where to dig for it. The catch is that the very first time, you have to do that digging. Let me take you to where the solver is. You just have to enable it once, and then it'll be there for you on the data ribbon forever. Click File. After you've clicked File, click Options. After you've clicked Options, click Add-ins. After you've clicked Add-ins, there's our solver. You don't have to click on it or anything here. What you do is you come down to Manage, and then in Excel Add-ins, just be sure Excel Add-ins is selected. Click Go. Put a check in the Solver add-in, nothing else, and then just click OK. Now we have Analysis Solver. Not too hard by itself. Trying to get that enabled for a lot of people, it's one of those things that I really try not to do without being there or having a video to do it, because it's just too many steps. You really kind of have to know where you're digging for some of these. Now that we have the solver, it's enabled, and fortunately, when you close and open Excel, solver will always be here for you now. Good. Past the tricky part. Now, where were we? Step 3, Data Analysis Solver. The solver opens up, and what we've got here is my practice run. The solver opens up, and what it's going to give us is a whole bunch of different parameters here in a kind of big scary window at first. Let's get things organized and then go through it and see if we can make heads or tails of this. Set objective. Well, the objective is going to be the total financed cost. Cell B15. Remember, those dollar signs mean absolute value, so it won't change or anything. If you move this formula with the fill handle, it won't move to new cells. That's the default, and unless you know very specifically that you're going to need this to mutate in some way after you've done it, if you're going to need this formula to change, take those out. I can't think of a situation where you'd want to, though. The solver's pretty specific. Just leave those dollar signs in. The default's going to work best for you here. Let's set our value at 650,000. Remember, no commas. Excel uses commas for something very different than we do. And then, by changing variables, we're going to click the input box, and we're going to select the variables B3. Now you use a comma. And B7. You'll notice if I click around here, it just keeps changing B7, B5. I can select any cell I want over here, but it just keeps changing. The moment I add a comma, now when I click around, it adds a new one. That comma means I'm done here. I have done what I came to do. We're moving on. So just B3, comma, B7, that's all you're going to need. Hit Enter. Now we're going to add one last constraint here, or rather one first and last constraint. And here's what a constraint is. It is going to limit the amount of change that your data can go through when you've selected that constraint. Here's what I mean. When we go add, it'll say add a constraint. Okay, well, first, which cell? Which cell do we want to constrain? We'll click the add-in, and we're going to constrain cell B10. Even though we've only selected cell B3 and B7 to change, B10, our total interest, that will be affected by the changes of the total amount we pull and the interest rate. So even though we haven't selected these as cells that we're going to change, we want this specific cell to hit a limit. This is the limit that we're putting in. Hit Enter. We go back to the add constraint. We want B10 to be less than or equal to 87,000. Click OK. Here we go. We're all ready to go. Now, if you're like me when you go through a large solver problem, unless you've really been digging and piecing this together, it can be a little bewildering at first. So let's try to read it left to right, top to bottom. Set objective, B15. So we want B15 to be a value of 650,000. We want to get there by changing the variables in cells B3 and B7, and we want to constrain cell B10 to 87,000 or less. It's starting to make a little more sense when you read it through as you would if you were talking to someone rather than setting up an Excel problem. Always try to do this and try to make things make sense before you just click solve. Excel's going to do the math, but if you actually need to run your own solver, you're going to want to have a feel for how best to use solver's options. Once we click solve, you'll notice all these numbers are going to shift in here. Plunk. Changed everything through. The total amount we take, the loan amount, the total interest. The number of months hasn't changed, but the payments and the total interest has. I mean, everything here is moving around. Now, when it gives us this window here, it's saying, so if you commit these values, you can't undo them. You would actually need to manually re-enter everything. So here we go. What we're going to need is for all of these numbers to be okay. So we're going to go through them. Okay, I like that. I like where this is going. All right, you know, I'm liking where this is going. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to keep the solver solution. Do not check return to solver parameters dialog. That means it's going to hop right back into the solver box we were just using. We like this. We're going to do it. We're going to keep the solution. Click OK. Boom. Send this to the printer and move it off to our finance guy. That's what we need. Now, things can be a little bit different. If solver gets requirements that it cannot fulfill, you may bump into different issues here. Let's open up solver again and let's solve for something a little more. What we're going to do is we're going to take cell B9. Yeah, let's see if we can get our monthly payments up there to 11,000. We're willing to flex a little bit more cash here. Our monthly payments are going to go to 11,000, but I really don't want B7 changing. I like that 5.45%. So when I select this, I'm going to get rid of B7 and just have cell B3 in there. Now we have cell B3. Let's get rid of that old constraint and add a new one. Our constraints now are going to be twofold. First, we want B3 to be greater than or equal to 650,000. I mean, when it comes to B3, 580,473, that's just not enough. We're going to have to take out at least 650,000 for this thing. We can't talk them down any lower. So B3 has to be greater than or equal to 650,000. Since we have two constraints we're adding, just click Add. It may look like it just kind of wiped it out and went away, but it's there. Now we'll add our second constraint in B7. If it's got to move the interest rate, so be it. But not only am I not going to force the interest rate to move, I'm going to lock it at 6%. There we go. Now when we click OK, we have B3 is greater than or equal to 650,000. B7 equals 6%. We're only going to change B3 within that constraint, and we're willing to let B9, our monthly payments, go as high as 11,000. All right, let's see what we get. Uh-oh. The big red exclamation point of doom. Turns out that while solver can solve darn near anything, the truth is that some math just doesn't play out, and this one didn't. Solver cannot find a point for which all constraints are satisfied. We have given the solver an impossible solution. We're going to have to cave. We're going to have to do something. We're going to have to change our interest rate. We're going to have to change the amount we're asking for. Whatever the case, this isn't doing it. Just click cancel. We can pop open the solver. We don't want to change to a whole bunch of dead numbers here. And then what we're going to do is go to B7 here. Yeah, I'm just not seeing any way to do it at 6%. Let's just delete that one. It's going to have to be 650,000 to get the loan we need. We are willing to pay 11,000 exactly. We budgeted for it. Let's see what happens to the interest. Let's solve. Hey, there we go. 760,000. It didn't force the interest to change. The total loan payments, the down payment, the loan we took out, those have all updated. Solver found a solution. all constraints and optimally conditions are satisfied. Optimality conditions are satisfied. Now, all we have to do is keep that solution, and there we go. Send it to the printer, make it so. We've got our budget. Remember, two big things in this one. Enabling the solver and the add-ins option by clicking go, and then being sure that when you're using the solver, you're reading it over to yourself. You're understanding it. You're not just punching in the numbers. You're not using the tracing paper. You're really freehanding it. Be sure you know where you're going and what you're doing, and this will start to make an awful lot more sense.